Her fingers closed around $50,000 in cash. For a single mother working two jobs, it was more money than she'd see in a year, and she gave every cent back. 2 weeks later, the owner was at her door. He wasn't there with a thank you card. He was there with a moving truck, new house keys, and a promise that would shatter the trajectory of her life. This is Maya, a 28-year-old working the overnight shift at a diner and days at a laundromat, her world defined by the relentless math of overdue bills and her daughter's future. The wallet she found didn't just contain money, it contained a test. And her choice that night would set off a chain of events so improbable, it challenges everything we think we know about kindness and karma. The diner's B shift ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a graveyard slot of coffee refills and lonely regulars. For Maya Johnson, it was the second of two jobs that kept a fragile roof over her and 8-year-old Chloe's head, a cramped studio in a building where the heat was a rumor from November to March. Her days began at the Sudsy Spin laundromat, folding strangers' clothes for $12 an hour. Her nights were here, in the pink uniform, serving pie to insomniacs and truckers. The math was constant and unforgiving. Rent, utilities, Chloe's after-school program, the ever-looming specter of a single medical bill that could collapse the whole delicate structure. Chloe was the why, a bright, observant girl who hid report cards with straight A's under her pillow to surprise her mom, who wanted to be an aerospace engineer, and who had already learned not to ask for things she knew were out of reach. Maya's dream was a savings account with just enough for a security deposit on a real one-bedroom apartment, somewhere with a window in Chloe's sleeping area. It felt as distant as the moon. The night it happened was a Tuesday in late October during a lull after the midnight rush. Maya was clearing booth 6 when her rag brushed against something solid slipped between the cracked vinyl and the wall. It was a wallet, thick, buttersoft brown leather. She glanced around. The last customer had left 20 minutes prior. Her first thought was protocol, take it to the manager's office. But as she lifted it, the weight was all wrong. It wasn't just cards. She opened it. The breath left her body. Neat, crisp stacks of $100 bills bound with bank bands. A quick, frantic count, 5 stacks of 100 bills each, $50,000. It was an impossible sum. It was more than 2 full years of her combined income after taxes. It was Chloe's college fund, a reliable car, dental work, breathing room for a decade, all sitting in her trembling hands in a silent, greasy diner. The psychological pull was immediate and visceral. Research shows that sudden windfalls trigger a flood of stress hormones alongside euphoria. The brain scrambles to process both threat and opportunity. For 57 seconds, Maya stood frozen, a war raging silently behind her eyes. The money represented an exit from the exhausting, precarious treadmill of her life. No one had seen her find it. She could slip it into her bag, quit the diner job, and tell no one. The temptation wasn't abstract. It was a detailed, full-color movie of relief playing in her mind. But another film played on a parallel reel. The owner, who carries that much cash, an elderly person's life savings, a small business owner's payroll, someone now in a state of pure panic, possibly facing ruin. She thought of Chloe, of the lessons she tried to model. Integrity isn't what you do when everyone's watching. It's what you do when absolutely no one is. Her fingers found the ID card tucked behind the money. The photograph showed a man in his late 50s, stern-looking with sharp eyes. The name, Alastair Kane. The address was in the city's most exclusive enclave, a gated community of estates overlooking the river. A billionaire tech founder, according to a quick, disbelieving Google search on her cracked phone screen. The man hadn't lost his life savings. He'd lost pocket money. This revelation changed the moral calculus, but it didn't simplify it. A part of her hardened. He didn't need it. She did. The world was unfair. This was a correction. Yet the act of taking it would fundamentally change her, and the secret would become a wall between her and Chloe. At 3:17 a.m., her shift supervisor asleep in the back office, Maya Johnson made her choice. She used the diner phone, dialing the number from a business card also in the wallet. A sleepy, wary voice answered. "Mr. Kane, my name is Maya. I'm a waitress at the Liberty Bell Diner on Elm. I believe I have your wallet." There was a long silence on the line, then a quiet, stunned, "You're calling to return it?" "Yes, sir," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Everything's here." They arranged to meet at the diner at noon the next day. Maya didn't sleep. She spent the dawn hours at the laundromat in a haze, the wallet, now sealed in a diner's Ziploc bag, feeling like a live coal in her apron pocket. She had done the right thing, so why did she feel a crushing sense of having just thrown a life raft back into the sea? Alastair Kane arrived precisely at 12. He was taller in person, dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored camel coat. His face was etched with a profound, weary isolation that his Forbes magazine photos never captured. He accepted the wallet with a quiet thank you, checked its contents with a quick, practiced motion, and then did something unexpected. He looked directly at her, really looked past the uniform. "You didn't have to call," he said, his voice low. "Most wouldn't have." Maya just nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "It was yours," he hesitated, as if battling an internal script. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a single $1,000 bill from the wallet and held it out to her. "A reward for your honesty." It was a generous gesture, more money than she'd ever held at once. Yet in that moment it felt like a transaction, a tip for a service rendered. It cheapened the struggle of her decision. She shook her head, a firm, final motion. "I can't. I didn't do it for a reward." A flicker of something, surprise, respect, confusion, passed behind his eyes. He nodded slowly, returned the bill, and left without another word. For 2 weeks, life snapped back to its grueling rhythm. The extraordinary event receded, becoming a strange story she told herself during the late-night bleach smells of the diner. The encounter with the billionaire felt like a brief, dissonant chord in her song of struggle, already fading. She assumed that was the end of it. A moment of past virtue, a footnote. Then on a rainy Thursday morning, a large moving truck pulled up in front of her apartment building, its diesel engine rumbling in the quiet street. Behind it, a sleek black sedan. Maya, coming home from the morning shift at the laundromat, stopped dead on the sidewalk. Alastair Kane stepped out of the car. He wasn't holding his wallet. In his hand was a single, gleaming gold key, and his expression was completely different. It was the look of a man who had solved a complex equation. He walked directly up to her as the first drops of rain began to fall. "Maya Johnson," he said, his voice carrying a new weight. "We need to talk about your daughter's future." Maya stood on the cracked sidewalk, the rain mingling with the diesel fumes, unable to form a sentence. The man repeated himself, his gaze steady. "I said, we need to talk about Chloe's future. And yours. Will you let me explain, or shall I have the truck turn around?" It wasn't a threat. It was an invitation presented with a stark, almost clinical clarity. The surrealism of the moment, the gleaming truck against her peeling apartment facade, the billionaire getting damp in the drizzle, overwhelmed her. She nodded mutely and led him up the 3 flights of stairs, past the smell of old cooking and mildew, to the studio door. Inside, Chloe was at the small table coloring. She looked up, her eyes wide at the stranger filling their tiny space. Alastair Kane didn't flinch at the cramped conditions. He took in the space with a single sweep, the mattress in the corner, the hot plate kitchenette, the textbook stacked neatly on a milk crate, and his expression softened imperceptibly. "Chloe, this is Mr. Kane," Maya managed. "He found something I lost." It was the only explanation that made any sense. He declined a seat, standing instead with a quiet intensity. "The wallet wasn't lost by accident," he began, cutting straight to the heart of it. "I left it there, deliberately." The confession hung in the air. Maya felt a cold trickle of dread. Was this some cruel game, a social experiment for the rich? "For 6 months," he continued, his voice low and deliberate, "I have been conducting what you could call an audit. Not of companies, but of character. I've lost that wallet with varying amounts of cash in 7 different places across the city: a coffee shop, a park bench, a library, your diner. You are the first and only person to contact me to return it. The others kept the money. One person spent it on a luxury handbag the same day, tracked by the credit card they used." He paused, letting the statistics sink in. A 1 in 7 success rate for basic honesty. But you, he said, looking directly at Maya, you called. You refused a reward that was, to you, a fortune. You passed a test most people fail without a second thought. Maya's initial shock curdled into anger. You tested me. You played with my life, with what that money meant. Do you have any idea what those 2 weeks have been like? Her voice trembled with a fury born of exhaustion and wounded pride. I do, he said, and for the first time his detached demeanor cracked, revealing a raw edge of regret. And that is precisely why I am here. The test wasn't for my amusement, Maya. It was my last attempt to find a reason not to disappear. He finally sat, the folding chair groaning under his weight, and told a story he had shared with no one. Alastair Kane, the reclusive tech titan, was a ghost in his own life. His fortune, built on a revolutionary data encryption algorithm, had isolated him. His marriage had dissolved a decade ago under the weight of his workaholism. His only child, a daughter named Alara, had died in a car accident 5 years prior at the age of 19. The driver of the other vehicle had been a distracted, overworked single mother, rushing between jobs. The tragedy had broken him in two irreconcilable ways: an unquenchable grief for his daughter, and a paralyzing, unspoken empathy for the woman whose momentary mistake had shattered both their lives. He had paid her legal fees anonymously. It changed nothing. I have spent 5 years in a house that echoes, he said, his eyes on the rain-streaked window. I fund charities, sit on boards, and the silence only gets louder. I began leaving the wallet as a perverse game. I think I wanted the world to prove it was as corrupt and selfish as I felt, to give me an excuse to withdraw completely. You didn't just return my money. You returned a piece of my faith, and in doing so, you presented me with a tangible problem I can actually solve. Gestured to the key in his hand. This is for a house, a 3-bedroom home in the Maplewood School District, which has the top STEM elementary program in the state. It is paid for. The title will be in your and Chloe's names. The moving truck outside is for your belongings. He then placed a sealed envelope on the table. And this is a fully funded scholarship trust for Chloe, covering tuition, books, and living expenses through a PhD, should she pursue one at any accredited institution she chooses. Chloe, who had been listening with the profound focus of a child who understands adults are deciding her world, whispered, "For college. For college, for summer science camps, for whatever helps you become an engineer," Alastair said, addressing her directly with a seriousness that honored her intelligence. Maya's mind was a storm of contradictions. It was everything she had ever dreamed of for Chloe. It was also a terrifying debt of gratitude, an erasure of her own struggle, a handout that felt simultaneously miraculous and humiliating. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "What are the conditions?" "Two," he said. "First, you allow me through the trust to fund an after-school tutor for Chloe starting immediately to ensure her path stays open. Second, you accept the house as a gift, not a loan. There are no strings, no hidden clauses. My lawyers have drawn up the documents. You can have your own attorney review them. I want nothing in return except to see this one right thing happen." The next 72 hours were a blur of disorienting luxury and profound anxiety. Maya, in a state of shock, allowed the movers to pack their meager possessions. She visited the house, a modest but beautiful craftsman-style home with a yard, a room for Chloe painted a soft blue, a kitchen with a working oven. It was a palace. She sat with a pro bono attorney from the Legal Aid Society who reviewed the 100-page trust document and the deed with a deepening look of astonishment. "It's clean," he told her. "It's the most generous, no-strings-attached gift I've ever seen. He's even funded an independent trustee to manage it, so his involvement is purely financial." The news, however, did not stay contained. A neighbor filmed the moving truck from their window. The video, titled "Billionaire Moves Single Mom Out of the Ghetto," went viral locally. By the time Maya and Chloe spent their first night in the new house, the story had been picked up by a national news outlet. The public reaction was a tidal wave. Comment sections split into warring camps. One side celebrated a modern-day fairy tale and karma for honesty. The other side seethed with cynicism. It's a PR stunt. He's probably grooming her. Why her? What did she really do? A popular talk show host dedicated a segment to the danger of savior complexes, arguing that Alastair's act was a narcissistic power play that undermined Maya's agency. This external noise ignited a fierce internal conflict Maya had been suppressing. The sheer scale of the gift felt like a weight. Who was she in this new narrative? The virtuous poor woman rewarded, or a pawn in a billionaire's guilt-ridden philanthropy? She lay awake in her quiet new bedroom, missing the familiar sirens and rattling pipes of her old apartment, haunted by the question of worth. Then the first letter arrived. Not an email, but a handwritten letter postmarked from the city. It read, "You don't deserve that house. You're a gold digger who got lucky. How much did you really have to do for that money?" It was unsigned. It was followed by another and another. Some were venomous, some pleading for handouts. The fairy tale had a dark sidebar, and Maya realized her life was now public property. Alastair, monitoring the situation through a discreet security team he'd installed, called her. "I anticipated this. I'm sorry. The media cycle will move on. The letters are cowards." But his assurance felt distant. He was used to scrutiny. She was exposed. The pivot came from an unexpected source, Chloe's new school. At the first parent-teacher conference Maya steeled for judgment was instead approached by the principal, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Evans. "Mrs. Johnson," she said, bypassing small talk, "Chloe is extraordinary. Her aptitude tests are off the charts, but I've reviewed her file from her old school. She was slipping, not academically, but in engagement." She was beginning to hide her intelligence to fit in, a common coping mechanism for gifted children in under-resourced schools. That stops now. The resources Mr. Kane's trust provides, the tutors, the upcoming summer program at the university robotics lab, they aren't charity. They are the appropriate level of support for a mind like Chloe. You didn't win a lottery. You leveled a playing field that was unfairly tilted against her. It was the reframe Maya desperately needed. This wasn't just about money or a house. It was about potential being recognized and cultivated, instead of being slowly extinguished by circumstance. Her decision to return the wallet wasn't a transaction. It was the first link in a chain that led to her daughter's genius being seen. Empowered, Maya made a decision. She contacted the news outlet that had broken the story and agreed to one interview on her terms. She sat down with the reporter, Chloe by her side, in their new living room. When asked about the criticism, the strings, she was ready. "This isn't a story about a billionaire saving us," she said, her voice firm. "It's a story about what happens when a child's potential is almost lost to poverty, and one man had the resources to stop that loss. The string is my daughter's future, and I will hold on to it with both hands." The interview aired. The narrative began to shift. But as the social media storm calmed, a more formidable challenge emerged from the shadows. A man named Carl Johnson, Maya's ex-husband, who had signed away parental rights when Chloe was 2 and had not paid a dime of child support in 6 years, saw the news. He hired a lawyer. The legal notice arrived by certified mail, its formal language a cold splash of reality. Carl Johnson was petitioning the court to overturn the termination of his parental rights, citing undue influence and a material change in circumstances, namely, the $1 million trust fund that now existed for his daughter. His argument was cynical and brilliant. He wasn't a danger. He was a father suddenly interested in his child's well-being, now that she was a valuable asset. Maya's hard-won stability shattered overnight. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a target. Alastair's lawyers, led by a fiercely competent woman named Simone Reyes, moved swiftly. They argued the termination was valid and permanent, based on 6 years of abandonment and non-support. But family court was a different arena, unpredictable and emotionally charged. A sympathetic judge could view Carl's petition as a father seeking redemption. The media, smelling a juicier chapter to the fairy tale, descended again. Deadbeat dad or wronged father, the headlines blared. Carl gave a tearful interview on a tabloid talk show, claiming he'd been struggling with addiction but was now clean, and that a billionaire had swooped in to replace him. Public opinion, ever fickle, began to sway. The story was no longer about honesty rewarded. It was a messy custody battle with a billionaire villain. The stress took a visible toll on Chloe. She started having nightmares, asking if a strange man would take her away. Her perfect grades slipped. The tutor reported a distracted, anxious child. Maya watched her daughter retreat, and a fierce, primal rage began to burn through her fear. She had fought for every scrap of safety for Chloe, and now the man who had provided none of it threatened to tear it all down. Alastair, monitoring the situation, made a strategic error born of his world of corporate takeovers. He offered to settle. He proposed a structured, supervised visitation plan for Carl, coupled with a substantial, one-time cash payment to make him go away quietly. "It removes the threat and the publicity," he explained to Maya over a secure video call. "It's the efficient solution." Maya exploded. "You want to pay him off. You want to buy my daughter's peace. That makes him a legitimate part of her life. He gets rewarded for showing up when there's money. No." For the first time, she saw a flash of frustration in Alastair's eyes. He was used to problems having price tags. Their disagreement created the first real fracture in their alliance. Maya felt patronized. Alastair felt his effective solution was being rejected for emotional reasons. In the vacuum of their strained communication, the situation grew more sinister. Carl's lawyer, a slick litigator named Derek Finch, filed a motion for a psychological evaluation of Maya, implying that accepting such an enormous gift from a stranger indicated poor judgment that could affect her fitness as a parent. It was a brutal, scorched-earth tactic. The court ordered the evaluation. The day before Maya's appointment with the court-appointed psychologist, a package arrived at Alastair's corporate office. It contained no letter, just photographs. Grainy, long-lens photos of Alastair entering the Maplewood house, photos of Chloe playing in the yard, and a single, typed line on a blank sheet. "How does your audit of character assess this proximity?" It was a threat, but its origin was unclear. Was it from Carl trying to imply something inappropriate, or from one of the other 6 people who had kept the wallet, seeking revenge for his experiment, or a random extortionist? The ambiguity was paralyzing. Alastair's security team found no immediate source. The message was clear. His involvement had made them all vulnerable. Simone Reyes convened an emergency meeting. "The custody case is a smokescreen," she said, her tone grim. "The real play is here." She laid out a new, alarming analysis. Carl Johnson didn't have the resources for Derek Finch. Someone was bankrolling him. Finch's firm had known ties to a rival tech conglomerate, Veridian Dynamics, which had been trying to acquire a piece of Alastair's encryption company for years. Alastair had always refused. "They can't beat you in the boardroom, so they're attacking you in the court of public opinion and family court," Simone said. "They're using Maya and Chloe as leverage. If they can paint you as an unstable, predatory figure interfering with a family, they can pressure your board, scare your investors. They want you to back down, to settle, to look weak. Or better yet, to sell." The revelation reframed everything. This wasn't just a greedy ex-husband. It was a corporate warfare strategy, using a mother and child as pawns. The magnitude of the manipulation left Maya numb. Her life had become a proxy battle in a war she didn't understand. Alastair was silent for a long moment, his face a mask of cold fury. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "They have made 2 catastrophic mistakes. First, they threatened a child. Second, they assumed I would choose my company over my principles." He turned to Maya. "You were right. We do not pay him, we destroy him, and we destroy whoever is behind him." A new, more brutal phase began. Alastair unleashed his legal and investigative resources not on the custody case, but on its source. His forensic accountants began dissecting the finances of Carl Johnson and Derek Finch's firm. His investigators dug into Carl's claimed rehabilitation, finding fresh arrests for disorderly conduct and unpaid bar tabs. They found the shell company that had paid Finch's retainer, and slowly, painstakingly, they traced a money trail back to a senior vice president at Viridian Dynamics. Simone filed a countersuit on Maya's behalf, alleging malicious prosecution, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy, nomming Carl Johnson, Derek Finch, and the Viridian executive. The lawsuit sought not just monetary damages, but a public, legal airing of the entire scheme. The pressure shifted. Reporters, tipped anonymously with court documents, began writing stories about corporate espionage using family court. The narrative transformed once more, from a salacious custody fight to a scandal about billionaires weaponizing the legal system. Viridian Dynamics, stock price dipped. The executive was placed on leave. In the midst of this legal hurricane, Maya faced her court-ordered psychological evaluation. Exhausted, angry, but clear-eyed, she sat with the doctor. She spoke not as a victim, but as a strategist. She detailed Carl's history, explained the corporate conspiracy as she understood it, and presented the stability she provided. Chloe's improved school reports before the crisis, the routines she maintained. My judgment, she told the psychologist firmly, was to trust a man who proved his integrity by giving with no strings. My mistake was not anticipating that others have no integrity at all. The psychologist's report, when submitted to the court, was a vindication. It found Maya to be a resilient, protective parent acting in her child's best interest, and noted the extraordinary and demonstrably malicious external pressures placed upon her. With the conspiracy exposed and the corporate backer retreating, Carl Johnson's case collapsed. His lawyer, facing bar complaints and his own legal jeopardy, withdrew. At a final hearing with no evidence and no funding, Carl stood alone before the judge. The petition was dismissed with prejudice, meaning he could never file it again. The judge, reviewing the evidence of the Viridian plot, awarded Maya full legal costs. As they walked out of the courthouse, a free woman in the eyes of the law, Maya felt no triumph, only a deep bone-level exhaustion. The battle was won, but the cost was etched on her daughter's face and her own soul. Alistair approached her, his own demeanor humbled. I underestimated the enemy, he said, and I underestimated you. I am sorry. Maya looked at him, at the man who had upended her life with a gift that had nearly broken it. You wanted to solve a problem, she said, her voice tired but steady. You didn't realize you were inviting me into your world of problems. They're bigger than mine. She paused, the noise of the city swirling around them. We can't go back to how it was before the wallet, so where does that leave us? Alistair didn't answer her question on the courthouse steps. Instead, a week later, he arrived at the Maplewood house with a simple, practical proposal. I have a business venture to discuss, one that requires a partner who understands value beyond a price tag. He laid out his idea in the living room with Chloe listening intently. The Kane character audit, as the media had dubbed it, was over, but the data from it, the 6 who kept the money, the one who returned it, had given him an idea. He wanted to create a new kind of scholarship and small business grant fund, but with a twist. It wouldn't be based solely on grades or business plans. A portion of the selection process would involve a real-world, anonymous test of integrity, similar to the wallet, but designed by an ethics panel. The fund would be called the Keystone Grant. I need a director of operations, Alistair said. Someone who has lived on both sides of that test. Someone who can design the human element to ensure it's fair, not a game. The salary is competitive. The role is yours if you want it. It was a lifeline, but more than that, it was respect. It wasn't a gift. It was a job offer that leveraged her unique, hard-won experience. It acknowledged her intelligence and her moral authority. Maya accepted. The next 6 months were a period of quiet, deliberate reconstruction. Maya began working from an office in the Keystone Foundation's downtown headquarters, designing the integrity metric, with a team of psychologists and community leaders. Chloe, with stability restored and continuous tutoring, blossomed. She won a regional science fair with a model satellite powered by solar cells. The nightmares stopped. Alastair's presence in their lives settled into a steady, grandfatherly rhythm. He came for dinner every other Sunday, often bringing a puzzle or a model kit for him and Chloe to assemble. He listened more than he spoke. The profound isolation in his eyes began to recede, replaced by a quiet, engaged focus. He sold his mansion in the gated community and moved to a penthouse downtown, closer to the foundation and to them. The house was less empty, he told Maya, because he no longer felt the need to fill it. The Foundation's first grant cycle launched. The integrity test was a carefully orchestrated scenario where applicants were given an opportunity to take a small, unfair advantage, unaware they were being observed. Of 100 finalists, 87 passed. Those 87 received their grants. The 13 who didn't were given feedback and invited to reapply the following year after mentorship. The press covered it as a groundbreaking approach. More importantly, it worked. The first Keystone Scholar, a young woman from a similar background to Maya's, used her grant to finish nursing school. One evening over dinner, Alastair shared a piece of news. The legal action against Viridian Dynamics and the rogue executive had been settled. As part of the settlement, Viridian agreed to fund a new, separate foundation initiative, a legal defense fund for families trapped in strategic litigation, meant to drain their resources, exactly what Maya had endured. The enemy's money turned against their own tactics. 2 years after the night in the diner, Maya Johnson was no longer a waitress. She was the published author of a white paper on ethical metrics in philanthropy, a sought-after speaker, and a mother whose daughter was thriving. The house was a home, filled with books and science projects and the smell of meals cooked in a reliable oven. Then came the final, surprising twist. Alastair requested a private meeting. He handed Maya a sealed envelope. "This is the last piece of the puzzle," he said, "and the only copy." Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a notarized, sworn affidavit from the driver of the vehicle that had struck and killed his daughter, Alara. The woman, whose name was redacted, described her life at the time. A single mother, working 2 jobs, sleep-deprived, rushing to pick up her own child from daycare. She described the moment of the accident, the grief that had consumed her since, and her disbelief when an anonymous benefactor had paid for her legal defense and therapy. The affidavit ended with a line, "I live every day with the weight of my mistake, and with the knowledge that the father of the girl I took from the world saved me from destruction. I do not know why." Maya looked up, tears in her eyes. Alastair's face was calm. "I never told you her story because it wasn't mine to tell, and I didn't want your pity or for you to feel like a replacement, but you deserve to understand the full circuit. The woman who caused my greatest loss was in a circumstance identical to yours. When I left that wallet, I wasn't just testing the world. I was looking for someone like her who would make a different choice. I found you, and in helping you, I finally forgave her." The circle was complete. His act was not just about rewarding honesty. It was an endless, looping attempt at atonement, healing, and finally, understanding. Maya wasn't a pawn or a project. She was the answer to a question he had been asking for 5 years. The following spring, the Keystone Foundation held its annual gala. Chloe, now 10, was asked to say a few words. She stood at the podium, adjusted the microphone, and spoke clearly. "My mom found a wallet. She gave it back. That's the whole beginning. The middle part was really hard. The end part isn't really an end because now we get to help write other people's beginnings." She then turned to Alastair, who was watching from the side. "Thank you, Mr. Kane, for the house and the school. But thank you more for showing up after you gave them. That's the part that matters." The room rose in applause. Alastair, for the first time in many years, did not hide his tears. Maya's life had been transformed not by a single act of honesty, but by the relentless, complicated, and deeply human commitment that followed it. The moving truck had brought more than furniture. It had brought the fragile, precious materials for a new future, built by three people who had been broken in different ways and who found their missing pieces in each other. So, what is the true currency of a life well lived? This story began with a test of honesty, but it became about something far more profound: the reparative power of seeing and being seen. Maya, Alistair, and Chloe's journey is a modern parable that echoes a foundational human truth. Research from institutions like the University of Zurich, which planted thousands of wallets around the world, found a fascinating paradox. The more money a lost wallet contained, the more likely people were to return it. Why? Because the stakes of someone else's loss become tangible. Our capacity for empathy isn't drowned by value, it's activated by it. Maya's choice in the diner wasn't just moral. It was a recognition of shared stakes in a world that tries to tell us we're alone. Alistair's experiment was born from a grief that had walled him off from that shared stake. In seeking proof of corruption, he found proof of connection. And in choosing to engage, not just reward, he allowed his own wound to become a source of healing for others. This is the second, deeper lesson. Kindness is not a one-way transaction. It is a circuit. The giver and receiver are transformed in the exchange, often in ways they could never have predicted. The $50,000 was never the point. The point was the commitment that followed, the showing up, the listening, the defending, the partnering. We are all, in our own ways, carrying hidden wallets, burdens of grief, regret, or silent struggle. And we are all presented, sometimes in the most mundane moments, with a choice. Do we look away, or do we see? Do we protect our own perimeter, or do we acknowledge a shared stake in someone else's story? Maya's honesty didn't just return cash, it returned a man to the world. Alistair's gratitude didn't just give a house, it gave a child her future. And in the end, they built something that outlasts any one of them, a foundation that institutionalizes the very principle that saved them, that integrity is measurable, that character is an investment, and that no one should have to face the system alone. Their story asks us a simple, vital question. In your own life, when you encounter a moment to choose honesty over convenience, to offer help without expectation, or to accept help without shame, what will you build with that choice? If this story reminded you of the threads that connect us, of the quiet power of a single good decision, then share it with someone who needs that reminder today. Subscribe to our channel for more documentaries that explore the depth of the human spirit. We leave you with this wish. May you have the courage to return the wallet and the wisdom to build what comes after. Thank you for watching.